Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron Feidt.
We love talking about the best of things.
Yes.
And this episode is no different. So today we're talking about getting the best, the best things out of your day, the best things out of your life, the best things out of situations you're in. And who wouldn't want to know about that?
Yeah. And it's really about creating, right? Creating the day, creating the best scenario, creating the best results you possibly can, because it largely starts with you. And so we're going to talk about what you can do to make that happen.
You know, what I think is cool is, like, if you thought about the opposite of this episode, right? The opposite of this episode would be just getting the worst.
Yeah.
You know, and I think about what our default nature is, you know, and as much as I like to tell people, when my alarm clock goes off, I'm excited for the day.
Yeah.
There's a smidgen of time. I'm making a small smidgen with my fingers to the listeners when I'm not super excited about waking up. It's like, it's the smidgen's gotten smaller. You know, but I remember when I was young, the smidgen was like a half hour of I'm angry because I have to wake up and get out of my warm bed and my comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And now the smidgen is like maybe a second or two where I'm like, oh, God, I'd love to go back to bed. But then we're rolling, right?
Right.
And I think what's interesting about the worst is the worst almost comes by default. You know, like negative things just happen. That the world has that. You know, but I think what you said nails it, right? Like, we're talking about creating. We're talking about, you know, turning the every day into your best day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, is it always going to be your absolute best day? Well, of course it's not going to be, but not doing anything is going to guarantee that who knows what's going to happen.
Right.
And probably it's going to default to the lowest level, which is usually not great. If you're a teacher, a manager, you're leading people in any capacity, parent at home, it doesn't matter the number or the people, really. Is you as the leader, no matter what capacity, you have a huge influence over what the results are going to be, right? You and I know we've taught martial arts for a long time. We've led all different ages, from little 3-year-olds all the way up into adults way older than us. And if we come in to the dojo in a bad mood with low expectations, our classes that we teach are not going to be good. They're just not, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter who's in front of you. If you have the right attitude, you can make them better. You can turn that class around, for sure.
And I think it's neat because, like, we've seen this, right? Is mindset and perspective play such a huge role. You know, and what's cool about that is, you know, you can literally change your mindset, the mindset of your team, the mindset of people around you in a second. You know what I mean? So mindset is one of the hardest things to change long term, but it's one of the easiest things, I think, to change quickly. You know what I mean? It's hard to change, like, our body. It's hard to change our, you know, like, it's hard to steer a big ship, you know, and change direction of a big ship. There's another boat reference.
Yes.
You know, but you know, that, you know, being able to shift your mindset and shift your perspective is something you can do immediately, which is why I love this episode, because it's something people can really bite into today and have a great day by the end and tell us about it on social media.
Yeah. And, you know, it's not gonna, like you said, you can shift it, and it doesn't mean it's going to stay. And if you're teaching the class again in 2 more days or 3 more days, you expecting the class to be at the level that you left it is a little ridiculous for you to think that, right? Are there students that come in at the same level or higher than you left them a couple days ago? Yes. How many students is that, percentage-wise? Very low, less than 5%, right? What is the majority? The vast majority of students or people around, they're going to not be in the right state of mind. You know, most people don't know how to put themselves in the right state of mind. You know, we talked about in self-defense, as you cross a threshold, one of the first things in self-defense is you need to make sure that if you cross a threshold in anywhere, you're looking side to side. You're looking for that. Now, hopefully not in your house, but if you're out in public, you don't want to go around a blind corner and not be aware, just in case, right? Well, in the same regards, and I know you've talked about this before, when you walk in a room, What do you bring? Do you want to bring happiness and joy and a smile, or do you want to bring miserableness and do you want to bring a frown and you want people to be like, "Whoa, the room just darkened as they walked in." All right, that's not what kind of person you want to be. So not only should you be aware self defense wise, but you should be aware of your actual state of mind as you're coming into rooms. So
Yeah.
that way you're changing them for the better. And this
Hmm.
is all part of expecting the best and getting the best.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we can, with that, we can get into our tips. And as you were saying it, it's funny because I was thinking, one of the hard things about mindset is creating a habit out of making
Yeah.
your positive mindset. And I think, we're not there yet, but talking about going to the third step of this really anchors it,
Yep.
so I'm excited to get into the steps. So don't leave before the third step because like
Yeah.
this is a good package here.
Yeah.
So really number one, which is what you were talking about,
Yeah.
is expecting the best,
Right.
and so, I have a thing that I say when people say, "Hey, how are you doing?" I always say, better every day. So today's the best one yet, right?
Yep.
Like that's one of those things. Is it true? Not always, but it's one
Yeah.
of those things I say to frame my mind, that the best things are coming ahead of me.
Right. And it's like getting up in the morning. And you mentioned that we're not all going to feel like getting up, and especially if we're feeling a little under the weather, that's going to affect us. But if you start off with, man, this is going to be a horrible day, and you haven't even gotten out of bed yet, you just decided that
Yeah.
it's going to be a bad day. Well, guess what? It's going to be a bad day for you. It's going to
Hmm.
follow. But if you say, you know what, I don't feel 100% today, but I'm going to make it the best day anyways. I'm going to try my hardest. I'm going to work at it. What kind of day are you going to have? The answer is it may not be the absolute best day you've ever had, but it's certainly going to be a lot better than what it would have been if you didn't have that strong expectation to start with.
When we talk about expectations, I want to make a delineation here for people because I think there's, especially as it pertains to other people, there's two kinds of expectations, right? There's expectations of what you are expecting, in your best reality. You know what I mean? So like
Mm-hmm.
we all have expectations. Like we expect, our employees to do certain things. We expect our spouse to do certain things. We have these expectations of what the world should look like, right? But I think there's an underlying expectation we have that we don't talk about as much, which is what we kind of expect reality to look like that day. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? And this is like, well, I expect my kids to leave their socks on the floor. I expect the things that, if you're really honest with yourself and you look at reality, right, you're saying, okay, like these are really the difference between those two expectations is where that disappointment happens.
Right.
Like kind of where that, so a great exercise for this, I think, is looking at those expectations you have,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to reframe them and
Mm-hmm.
trying to, make them a more positive expectation, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So this first step is vital. And I think we put it as a first step because it needs to be your first step.
Yeah.
It needs to start with you. You need to have a good, strong expectation of things. You need to make sure that you are in the right mindset. So that way, whatever follows, it's going to be influenced by you because
Mhm.
we have way more influence over people than we think. Now there's a caveat that we do but we don't, right? I mean, we can't change people, but we can influence them. And especially again, if you're in a leadership position like I mentioned earlier in the podcast in the start, at whatever capacity, your mindset, your expectations that you have in your head are going to largely impact the people that are following you,
Yeah.
whether they're following you as a teacher or they're following you as the head of the household or whatever the case is, right? Can you get your kids in a better mood? I know you can. I've seen it, right? You can turn your girls around and make them much happier. Now it's not always easy, right? But you can
Mhm.
definitely move them in the right direction. Can you also do the opposite,
For sure.
right? Can you
Absolutely.
also, when your spouse come in and nag and complain and point out all the things that they're doing wrong, and is that setting the right tone for your household? The
Can't do
answer
that
is
because my
no.
spouse doesn't do anything wrong.
Exactly. Good
Right.
answer. Good
Yeah.
answer. So, I mean, we know this instinctually. I mean, as I'm talking through this, you don't even have to be uh, into the power of positive thinking. You just know that you can set the tone of the workplace, set the tone of the household, set the tone of a party
Yeah.
just by how you are.
Absolutely. So expecting the best, step one. Number two, which I think is sometimes even harder, is looking for
Yeah.
the best, and
Yeah.
this is what we've done podcasts about this before and we talk about this, but this is what we call being a good finder,
Yeah.
and it's really about going into your day, going into the situation, going into the conversation or wherever you
Hmm.
are, and looking for those things and those moments that reinforce your
Right.
positive expectation.
Right. And this I think can be tough for some people, um, especially people that are looking to improve things and people that like to continue to get things better.
Yeah.
And so the dichotomy of you know what I mean, of that is that okay, you have to look for what's wrong, you have to look for what you need to fix, but at the same time, that can't be your sole focus. You
Yeah.
also have to look for, like you said, what are things going right. I
Yeah.
go again back to a classroom, whether it's a school classroom, martial arts classroom. If you're looking for all the things that are wrong and you're pointing those out, you're going to get more of that,
Yeah.
especially when you're dealing with younger kids. You need to point out all the good things they're doing so that way they're getting reinforced with the positives. Because all kids want is attention. That's all they want. They'll get it negative or positive. They don't care if it's positive or negative. So you, as the teacher, need to give them the positive attention. And the only way to do that is by looking for the good things they're doing right, looking for the best.
Yeah. I heard a quote, and I don't remember who said this a long time ago, but it was the bonus of leadership is celebrating together. The burden of leadership is suffering alone.
Yeah, that's
And
great. Yep.
I think, one of the onuses of achievers and leaders is, we're always moving that bar. So we're always looking at ways to improve, which can be perceived as focusing on the negative. You know
Right.
what I mean? And that's something that we kind of do introspectively. We do it during our planning sessions. We do it during our,
Yeah.
our alone time. But we've also all worked for somebody at some point in our lives who did this publicly, who said,
Hmm.
"Hey, these are all the things we have to improve on." But they never really focused on the things you were doing right. They
Yep.
never celebrated the achievements. They never did that.
Right.
And it's really hard to follow somebody who's constantly trying to improve other people, who's
Right.
constantly saying, "Hey, you should do this. You
Right.
should."
Yep.
Most people just like we don't follow that way.
Right.
So I think, building the skill set of being able to look and find, really find those things
Right.
is vital.
It is. It is. Yep. Yep. And that moves to number three, which I alluded to a little bit in my little rant in there. As you're looking for the best, um, and finding the best, you need to reinforce it.
Yeah.
That's the other key. And what you do by reinforcing it is in a classroom, you call it out. You praise. One of the things I learned early on in teaching, and I think for the most part, it's very helpful, is praise in public and reprimand in private. And I
Yeah.
think if you can do those two things, and of course, there's always exceptions to those. Sometimes a reprimand in public is for a purpose,
Hmm.
and so it's not a 100% rule, but it's really like a 99, probably 99% rule, is that you really want to praise in public. And so what you do by that, and we know in the martial arts classroom, if we tell a student, hey, look at Johnny's horse stance, that looks awesome, what's going to happen to all the kids around him and in that class? They're going to try to go a little lower. So Johnny feels good about it, and then everybody else is working a little harder to get that next praise. And then if you follow up with, hey, look at little Susie, look at the, and then all of a sudden now it's a ripple effect throughout your class that everybody's working a little bit harder and feeling good about being praised.
Yeah, 100%. I think the internal part of this, if you're just looking at your own day, is we've told ourselves in the morning this is going to be great. We're looking for those things, but then it's kind of saying, "Wow, I was right. Today was a great day." That
Yeah.
cap at the end of the day, where we're saying, "Here's the stuff that went well. Here's
Yeah.
that magic list of the wins. Here's that, like if when you sit down at the end of the day and you say, 'Man, it feels good to be right,' when I wake up in the morning and I say." This is going to
Yeah.
be a great day, and here's
Yeah.
the proof that it was a great day.
Right.
I think that's super important. But also, what you were saying, dead on. My mom, when I was growing up, was the queen of this, and it was, embarrassing me in front of people. And
Yeah.
I'm using air quotes, mom, because she's listening. Embarrassing me in front of people by telling them, "Hey, this is my son. He's a straight A student," or "This is my son. He's a
Right.
black belt in karate," or "This is my,"
Yeah.
But what she was doing was she was praising the things that I was doing well. There were plenty of things she could have said that were not the things I was doing well, but she never did. not in
Yeah.
public. You know what I mean? And I think, that's something I try to do with my team, with my family. But, it feels like you're embarrassing them when you do it. Like I know, when
Yeah.
I do it to my team in front of other people, I feel like, oh, man, I hope they're not embarrassed that I said this.
Yeah.
That's okay. Let them be a little embarrassed that you're, doing that, kind of, flying their flag. I think it's a good
Right.
thing to do.
Yeah, and because we've all seen the opposite, we've heard the opposite,
Oh
and
my God. Yeah.
you those parents that come in and they're telling us what their kid needs to work on, which we want to know. I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of what we ask. But what what really bothers me is sometimes you have parents that will say that talk to them, talk about them in front of them like they're not even there.
Yeah.
What do you think that does to their self-esteem
Yeah.
and the kids just overall confidence is going to be low?
Mhm.
Man, this kid of mine, he just never listens. He's disrespectful. He does this, does that, and laying down all the lists, and they're standing right there in front of them.
Yeah.
You know,
Uh-huh.
and now that's being embarrassed,
Yeah,
right?
for
That's
sure.
a reason to be embarrassed
Hmm.
when somebody's airing your dirty laundry in front of basically a stranger the first time you met your karate instructor. That I don't recommend at all. You
No.
know, do we want to fix those things? Absolutely. Do we need to know those things? Absolutely. Do you need to reinforce those negatives in front of your kids? No. A
No.
little parent tip, little
Yeah.
extra parent tip for
Well,
everybody.
and I think as an action item, that's a great action item today for everybody.
Yeah.
Is look for when we're looking for the best, actually reinforce it with some people. Like if you
Yeah.
see somebody do something good, call it out. Call it
Yep.
out in front of other people. Be like, dude, I love how
Right.
you just did that for me.
Yep.
It'll make you feel good. It'll make them feel good. Great way to spend a Tuesday.
Be a Mrs. Cardone.
Be a Mrs. What, really?
Mama
Like
Cardone. Yeah.
shout out, mom.
Yeah.
I know it's funny. My birthday's next week, and we're spending the day together after this episode's going to release, probably. So I'll hear it in the car the whole way home. Can't wait, Mom. Um, so anyway, going through our action steps again. This is how to get the best out of your day, or how to get the
Yes.
best out of the situation, but really creating the best. Number one, expect the best. Go into things with that expectation that the best things are going to happen.
So then, as you're expecting the best, you have to look for the best. So look for things that are going to reinforce why the day's going so well, and make sure that your mind is focused on just those things.
Absolutely. And then the last step, reinforce the best. So really look for those things, reinforce them in yourself. Let yourself be right. Write down those things that proved that today was a great day, but also reinforce it with other people. As you see things that you like, shout it out, talk about it, be a Mrs. Cardone. We should let's label this episode that.
Yeah.
And that wraps up this episode of the Achieve Results Now podcast. Everybody, share this with somebody who would like it. We'll see you on the next show.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.